basically what kind of people are popular in Japan and which ones are not so popular, or which ones have a harder time making or keeping friends. And this can apply to both foreigners and Japanese people. At least at first, it's very important to always try to appear positive and not come across as too negative. I know. I mean, friends are the people you tell everything, right? But at the beginning, what happens? Japanese people normally, when they meet up with friends, usually get together maybe once a month or every 2 months or every 3 months. If they're friends you see after long periods apart, it's best not to go and tell them all your problems, or at least try to be positive. There's always a time to talk about your anxieties and things like that. But in general, you should try to be positive. And do you know why I say this? Because I know people who, for example, sometimes meet up with friends and say, no, I don't really feel like seeing so-and-so, because he always has emotional problems and stuff. And sometimes you just want to be with friends and you get ready to have a good time. I know it sounds bad, right? But of course, if they're super close friends who see each other all the time, then sure. But if they're people you hardly ever see, and look, I'm not saying it's okay, I'm just saying what kind of people end up pushing other Japanese people away. And I say this because, well, even though this can happen with any kind of people, with Latinos, for example, we don't really have a problem meeting someone and listening to their problems. It's like we psychoanalyze each other, right? And Japanese people, on the other hand, with the reputation for mental health issues, it gets much more complicated. Precisely because sometimes people have no one to turn to, no one to tell their problems to. And so sometimes they also repress what they're feeling among friends, because they know that when they meet up with them, looking, they can't be constantly talking about their problems. What I'm saying is pretty sad, but when you meet up with friends, if you spend all your time telling them your problems, and I think this applies to people from any country in the world, you're not going to like it, you're not going to have a good time. What happens is that when a friend feels down, we want to spend more time with them to help, right? Or it's like the friendship changes, not just to have a good time, but to give support to the other friend. And that's something more common among Latinos. Among Japanese people, it's a bit more complicated, because they don't meet up with each other as regularly. Even so, on the other hand, it's good, for example, to ask for advice. I mean, not to share your problems, but to ask for advice. Like, for example, let's say I have some problems with my partner, and I don't know what to do. And then, well, in the middle of gossip, let's say, it's like you're opening up to the person, and the other one might say, oh, what can you do, right? At that point, it mostly depends on the other person. Because maybe they want to give you some advice, or they just want to listen to you, or they don't want to know anything about the topic, right? But that depends on each person. But sometimes you have to know how to ask for advice, and not just say that you're feeling bad, and that's it. Or, for example, looking for a job too, or maybe work problems you might have, which sometimes is common, or there's something you don't understand. Let's see, if you're a foreigner, you usually talk about cultural differences, right? At work they do this, and I don't get why. Maybe they can explain it. There are many Japanese people who sometimes know the answer, but they're too lazy to explain it to you, so they just say yes. Why is that? And that's when you kind of realize it's not a topic they want to talk about, that they're not interested. Maybe those people just want to get together to have a laugh. Another is knowing how to balance being a conversationalist and the center of attention. Look, in a party environment, having fun with a lot of friends, drinking alcohol, wanting to be the center of attention isn't a bad thing. They'll see you as someone fun. But it's important not to overshadow others, which is also something that applies to people in any country in the world, right? In a cheerful environment, we all want to have a good time. And the quiet people, it's like later on people forget who that person was. Or maybe they'll be the last person called next time to go to the beach. I don't know. But something very important in a conversation, and that's something we Westerners do a lot, is trying not to criticize or compete with what the Japanese person has. Or, for example, they might get together for a barbecue, right? A Japanese barbecue uses a grill for thinly sliced meat. I mean, the Japanese have their own way of of enjoying their barbecue culture, which is very different from that of Latin America, with giant pieces of meat in a house, all that. There, for example, you can share as a curiosity how things are in your country, but without wanting to put down the Japanese style, okay? Because something we Latinos have a lot of is pride in the culinary culture of grilled meats, and you must try not to end up offending others. For example, saying, well, for us, this isn't barbecue, because barbecue is with a lot of charcoal and a big piece of meat like this, and no, we can't call this barbecue. And you see, if you go to Argentina, you'll go crazy. And the Japanese will be like this. Well, that's fine, but we're not in your country. And, well, it looks interesting. Well, take me to your country then. If you want to brag so much about your meat, I mean, you have to pay attention to that. You shouldn't be too much of a fundamentalist either, insisting that in your country things are done better, right? But rather say, look, in my country, it's different. It's done this way. Look, I'll show you pictures, but without trying to show off or brag. And this is more than just advice. It's something real that foreigners need to keep in mind, right? Because obviously this doesn't apply to Japanese people, but for foreigners, when it comes to making friends, Japanese friends, I don't know. Being able to share interesting facts about your culture is great. But constantly competing, saying that everything in your culture is better, I think that can happen anywhere, right? If you're Argentine and an Italian says, Italian pasta is 20 times better, go back to your country, go back to your country. That's what all of us Argentines are going to think if an Italian comes to break our balls about our pasta, right? That's just an example. Then another piece of advice for foreigners, obviously, is the language issue. Language is essential, it's communication. And for example, what I can recommend to many people, is that you can gradually learn the language here at work, like I did. But it's not the same as studying it. If you study it, if you can communicate in the most basic way, it's much easier to get a job. At any time of the year, you can write and sign up for classes. Ikaruga.com.ar. Not being extremely direct. I mean, another thing we Latinos have is that we talk about things very openly, very directly. Japanese people are a bit more discreet about those things. Let's see, it sounds very general, very basic, but the reality is that, for example, I don't know, let's say a Japanese person tells you that their boss is very strict and mistreats them. And you tell them, well, confront him, tell him, no, you have to do this. Do that. That's the type of advice that's pointless to give to a Japanese person, since we already know it's not culturally accepted. You see, in my country, if someone mistreats me, I beat them. That's what you have to do. No, you can't give advice like that or be so direct. But instead, if you don't understand that part of the culture, well, since you're in a conversation among friends, you can say, and why? But I don't know, it feels very strange to me in my country. Maybe it's not so common to let yourself be mistreated by your boss. I mean, let's see, we know that person is aware that they have a small work problem, and we're not the ones to be telling them what they should or shouldn't do. You don't need to be so direct with those matters or personal opinions. No. Maybe help them realize something, but not necessarily try to correct them or, in a way, criticize them, because that can really offend Japanese people being too direct. Japanese people call that storito sogairu. Too straight to too much right there, and that's sometimes not very good among Japanese people. Believe it or not, many people can keep their friendships stable thanks to being discreet within the relationship, especially when it comes to giving personal opinions about others. Well, let's see, it's already summer, I'm really hot. Something short. Good to have something refreshing, some vitamin C. You see, I want to take the opportunity because the other day I met up with a friend named Martin, who's the foreigner with more Japanese friends than anyone else I've ever met. Not to mention, he's the most popular guy I know. I asked him a few basic questions, and, well, these were his answers.
What advice can you give someone to make Japanese friends?
Two pieces of advice I would say. The first one, which is a bit more obvious, is the language issue. If you know Japanese, Japanese people will feel more comfortable with you, open up, and you'll have more topics to discuss. Imagine a foreigner visiting your country. If Germans or Russians always speak English, it's harder to talk and connect.
If they come to speak to you in Spanish, you respond much faster and you take them out for a walk.
And then the topic of hobbies or what interests you is one of the most important points. This no longer has to do with the linguistic part. If you have the same hobbies, if you like soccer, you're going to talk about soccer. You're going to get along better. You're going to find the conversation much more natural.
An otaku who knows how to speak Japanese comes here. What advice would you give him?
Attend conventions and anime events and talk to people. It's just that the Japanese otaku in Japan, it's not a very sociable environment, let's say. But if you go to Akihabara, to the card bars, where they don't just buy, where I think they can also play with each other, or the board game cafes, tabletop games, all that world where there are also otakus. You'll also get along with Japanese otakus. I wouldn't really recommend it much, but at least it's a good first step.
Girls, for example.
I think personally, if you don't know Japanese, the interaction is much more dynamic. It's weirder because of the back and forth with the languages, but I think it's much more dynamic, and the girls like it a bit more. It's kind of more fun, in quotes. If you have a good level of Japanese or speak Japanese naturally, it's a bit more complicated because it's always the same. For me, many Japanese women are looking for this experience with a foreigner. I don't know if it's about status, whether they're equal or not, or if one is above the other. It's about the dynamic, having fun, making mistakes, and not taking things too seriously. If you speak Japanese, most women will think that you've already assimilated more of Japanese culture, that there's a certain part of you that behaves very Japanese, and there are people who might really like that. Many Japanese women may like that. Since you're essentially a candidate for a long-term relationship, or there are many women who are going to hate it because they want the foreigner who isn't that good at Japanese or who doesn't speak Japanese. That's the answer.
For you, what kind of people are popular among Japanese to be friends with?
The famous Yasashi, the one who's more, I don't know what's the word in Spanish, the gentleman, the one who's more gentle, more affectionate is mostly the most popular. The one who looks more serious, more like a gentleman, is the most popular. Those are the ones who, in the long run, look the best.
I don't mean the really fun young ones.
Maybe you're, let's say, in college, that could be. But even in college, when they're yakaishi, and when they're starting to work, they look more for emotional stability, for something more serious. Okay to have fun, but with some moderation. The one who jokes around a lot, the joker, the clown, let's say, very funny, he can be popular when they're very young. But once they're over 22, 23, not so much anymore. He seems less serious and more like just a friend. Not so popular.
Call when it's time to have fun.
Exactly.
The one we call for barbecues.
The one who plays the role of makes everything a lot more fun. Exactly.
Well, let's all keep in mind that Teen Chan's little face, all blonde and looking so nice, isn't a face that scares you, because he's not a 2-meter-tall Viking, all super bearded, with a face that looks like he's going to kill you. Yeah, he has two advantages. One, he's all blonde, fair-skinned, with an angelic face. The most important thing is that he speaks Japanese very well. I mean, he has a very, 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 very good level of the language, and therefore that helps him socialize. And also, well, that's just his personality, that he's a very good conversationalist. In fact, sometimes he works at a bar. And here, working at a bar means knowing how to talk to customers. Working behind the bar at a small place makes conversation crucial, and he definitely knows how to talk. When I see him, he's always telling me something. So he's also an interesting person, someone you don't get bored with. And he has things to share, not necessarily to brag about. I mean, he's doing really well. He always has a lot of friends. And with girls, well, I don't think he ever went hungry. The other thing, sadly but true, is that to have friends, you need money. Because basically in Japan, since there's not much of a culture of hanging out at friends' houses, you need money. Look, this doesn't make you more or less popular, but it's something necessary, right? You need money because you always meet up to hang out, to go have a drink somewhere. If you happen to find really young friends who are kind of stingy and don't have much money, then maybe yes. They buy a beer at the 7-Eleven and drink it in a park. That can happen too.
But look, let me tell you, in Japan, something I really like about Japan is that here you can meet people and make friends with Japanese people, with others.
And maybe at no point it seemed that way to you, or you didn't notice at all. But maybe that person you got along with while chatting at a bar, and maybe you end up exchanging line, which is like, what's up here? Maybe the other person was a multimillionaire and you never even found out. And that's something that every year that I live in Japan, I keep confirming. Japanese people never show off about having money. Of course, there are always exceptions. Just like when I say, no, Japanese people are like this, they're reserved, or they're always punctual. But all of my friends have some Japanese friend about who they say, this is the exception to the Japanese stereotype. This one is always late, this one is always distracted, this one is always yelling. There's always Japanese cases that are exceptions, which is something I honestly really like about this country. I mean, really, the same way that you take the subway and someone says that public transportation is for poor people. No, sir. Here in Japan, girls get on the subway with their Vuitton bags, their Chanel and their dire dresses. That's how they ride the subway. They can even get on a bicycle because from the train station to their house, it's a 15-minute walk, and they prefer to do it in 5 minutes by bike, wearing their dire dress. That's something I really respect about the Japanese. I mean, while there are a lot of people who wear brands, there are also a lot of people who have a lot of money. And the other day, I met a friend's boss a guy from a wealthy family, rich his whole life, people with a lot of money. And he wore non-brand clothes. I mean, clothes that didn't have any brand at all. And you look at his face, and maybe he tells you, no, I work as a cashier at a supermarket. And you believe him. But no, the guy is actually someone with a lot of money and properties. What does this have to do with anything? Well, it's that the Japanese don't really care that much about where you come from or who you are. I mean, on one hand, you might feel that the Japanese are very superficial, but at the same time, they're not. The Japanese have that contradiction. They're superficial in that it's a superficial society where everyone looks impeccable and dresses well, but all of them do it, and not everyone is wearing Cartier. That's what I mean. Everyone wears Uniqlo and GU. They have good clothes, cheap but nice. What were these families arguing about?
About the direction.
Of course, what happens is that they don't watch Japatonic and they don't know that Google Maps is the best way to get anywhere. Not looking for a written address.
They were looking for the hotel's address. Maybe the hotel was right there, but they're super pissed off.
They were searching for the hotel and checking its card. Which hotel is it? This isn't a tourist tips video. But anyway, the thing is that here you can meet people from all walks of life, and that's really cool. Honestly, I really recommend that if you come here, try to make friends with Japanese people. That will help you adapt, learn the language, everything. And well, that's all. See you next time. Greetings to you, your family, your pet, and your annoying neighbor. What a pain in the ass, all this political campaign, we have to vote next week.
I hate them so much. Sundays, they wake you up on Sundays with those speakers.